All right, it's about time, and I will just start the session. Hello, everyone, and welcome everyone to join our online event. And it's about biodiversity. And thank you very much. And I would like to say good afternoon, but I know a lot of you are from the other side of the world, so thank you very much for making your effort to join in the late evening or even at the night. And I'm also very grateful to our speakers for taking their time out of a very, very busy schedule. Although we have made a slight change of our speaker at the last minute, but I hope that is fine. So this event is organized by a group of PhD students, including me, and we are from Grantham Center for Sustainable Future in University of Sheffield. So thank you very much for our leader Mary, Oscar, Dama, and Jocelyn for all of your effort to hold up this event. So before we start, your microphone and your camera is turned off by default. And if you have any question during the talk or the discussion session in the end, you can always click the purple icon at the right bottom corner of your screen, and you can chat here. You can type your questions here, and or chat with the other people. Also, before we start, you may want to open the setting pane and scroll down to and click all the notification to have a better experience when you have the talk. And also, at the middle bottom of your screen, you will see this two icon, and you can provide some feedback for the speakers, and you can raise up your hand if you have any technical issues. So you can always raise your hand for help, or you can just go for our tech support today, the Look Wild. You can find it in the list of So if everyone, anyone that is interested in involving in farming in the UK or are interested in soil microbiome, please contact Mary, as she is looking for a participant to interview. And alternatively, you can use the link in the chat to fill in the survey and to participate in her research. So last but not the least, So here is our coming up event for fast fashion. If you're interested in this, you can look them up on Twitter and sign it up on 1st of June, on 10th of June. And last but not least is our chair for today, Dr. Ellie Harrison. She is an NERC Independent Research Fellow at University of Sheffield. Her research focuses on the ecology and evolution of microbial communities, in particular the interactions between bacteria and the mobile genetic elements that infect them. Her current work involves rhizobia bacteria, which lives in and provides nitrogen for legumes. So there is a photo competition, and I will announce the winner at the end of our discussion. So without further ado, I will hand over to Ellie. So here you go.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ming-Yen, and thank you very much to all the organisers for bringing this really fascinating group of people together. So I'm a microbiologist, as has been said, and I am particularly interested in microbiology of the soil because our soils are alive. They are home to a huge diversity of organisms, which provide many of the functions that that help our ecosystems to grow, to help plants to grow in particular. But often in the way that we've transitioned towards a very industrial form of agriculture, we have moved away from our understanding and our dependence on all of this myriad of functions that organisms in soil and healthy soils can provide. And this ranges, not just from providing nutrients to plants and helping them protect against disease, but in carbon storage and mitigating impacts of climate change. And I think what's fantastic about this session is that it's really brought together people with very different perspectives. So, as someone working in the academic sphere, we can often think of these questions as being purely linked to science of what this particular bacteria does when it meets this particular plant. But what we need to transition to a new and more sustainable form of agriculture is collaboration from all spheres involved in food production, be that policy to people that grow food, as well as hopefully some kind of role for the researchers looking at this kind of area. So I'm, not particularly here to push my side of things, and I'm just here to introduce our fantastic speakers. So hopefully we have, first up we have Sunita Sangha, who is an independent consultant with really extensive experience in all sorts of different areas around agricultural, in the agricultural sphere. So that ranges from research to policy development, as well as advocacy. And she's also working in areas of social change and women's empowerment in India. And Sunita's work takes her from working with organisations at the international scale to the local scale, looking at how to train and capacity build, as well as implement different strategies and evaluate their successes. So Sunita, I'll hand over to you to start us off.
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me all?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Yes, yes. Good evening, everyone. Respected Chair, Dr. Ellie, my fellow panelists, Rosa, Zachary, and my dear all other friends who've joined us online to participate in this event. It gives me immense pleasure to be here, to be participating in this important event and issue of great importance. Before I begin, I would like to thank the Grantham Center for Sustainable Futures, University of Sheffield, for giving me this opportunity. Special thanks to the organizers who have done all the great effort to bring this together. And so my presentation will try to explore how science, policy, and practice interface has shaped the way soils have been understood. And my learnings and my understandings are basically based on the research work, the soil science research, the policy, the related policies, and the sustainable practices, the work which I have done, which I did in the initial years of my research. And what is disheartening for me is that that after about more than 2 decades now, the issues remain the same. And there's not have been much changed, but yeah, a lot of efforts are on at various levels, but more efforts are required, and because since soil being a very, very important natural resource. So like the current pandemic has also, it's a testimony of the fact that if we don't treat our natural resources well, then they balance it in their own way and in more different and difficult ways. And so it's very, very important to look at the natural resources, and soil is a very, very important natural resource. So we'll start right away. How will I? Okay, I can change it from here. Okay. So soil is important for all of us, and we all see that soil health crisis has emerged. It's a global crisis, but how have we come about? Why are we here? Why are we at this position? The way we have done our agriculture the way we have done our agriculture is in a very, very different form. It would have never been done in that way, the way we have done agriculture. Our input intensive agriculture has been the main cause of the soil health crisis all over, the kind of the inputs, the over irrigation, the chemicals, the fertilizers, the pesticides, they all have led to agriculture. We were all happy by when we were getting production and good yields using all these technologies, but when there was an agriculture crisis, when there was stagnation in yields, then we started to look at what could be the reason, because when we were increasing more chemicals, when we were increasing more fertilizers, there was no more effect. So there was a stagnation somewhere, there was a limiting factor somewhere, and it was realized that deterioration of natural resources is an important factor which has led to where we are. And this deterioration of natural resources has the exploitation has not only led to the deterioration of natural resources, but it has led to other inequalities, because then we have all the problems related to excess to these resources, because resources become a limiting factors. How science has responded to it. Now, science has mostly responded to it in a very, very technocentric, as a very, very, it has come out always as a very technocentric solutions it has come out with. Policy, how has policy has always been following this production based approach. So and sustainable practices which have emerged, they have not been heard enough. So all these three domains which are working separately and which are addressing the agriculture domain, they seem to be working very, very differently. So I'll explore in detail in all these different domains in my further slides. But what it has led to is loss of living soils, and poor health of soils is a testimony to that. So when we talk about living soils, the poor living soils, then we talk about soil diversity. When we talk about that living component, then we talk about soil diversity. So soil diversity and soil health is important, is evident from the fact that now we have a World Soil Charter. We are looking at the soil resources world over, and there have been effort. FAO has come out with this report on status on what soil resources. Soil, when we talk about soil diversity, as I said, soil diversity is a key element of that constitutes the soil health, because it is that living system, those living organisms and their interactions. So this is a key indicator of the soil health. And how do soil health and how is soil health seen by one of these, few of these renowned soil scientists? They see that soil health is critically important, and it is important to see soil not in a very, very, we have to see it from a very, very long perspective, in a long-term sustainability, at a very, very long-term sustainability level, that it leads to long-term sustainability. Then it is the biological and the dynamic nature of the soil is a very, very important part of the soil health. There have been efforts, the UN has acknowledged it, that soil health has its ramifications, has its implications, and there are going to be effect on the hunger and poverty, because as I've spoken earlier also, that it will lead to all the social inequalities, because when there is when there is lack of resources, there is excess of resources is lacking, and all those inequalities they result in. And to really take this forward, in 2015 International Soil was also celebrated, and back home in India, a few concerned organizations such as IIT Delhi, Vasan, RRA Network, and Shivnadar University, they all came together, and they wanted to deliberate on this very, very important issue on Indian soils, the poor condition of Indian soils, and all these key stakeholders, they came together to deliberate on these issues and to show the policymakers a way forward. And most of my learnings, particularly with respect to this presentation and understanding, has come from from that meeting. So what has been the past approach? The past approach has been very, very production oriented, as I've already said, where soil has always been treated as a medium, medium for growth and medium for food production. So what has happened to the soil has never been, has been ignored, has been largely ignored. And most of the solutions have been relief oriented, like if the production is not up to the mark, and if we want to increase the yields, then what we do, we end up putting the external chemical nutrients without understanding what impact these chemical nutrients or over irrigation. For example, we have moved from this soil moisture kind of approach to filling the fields with so much of water, and when we irrigate them till the plants they start wilting. So it is really, really very important to look at some of these points, because when we talk about soil moisture, we mean the right kind of conducive atmosphere, right kind of atmosphere where living organisms can grow, and the soil biodiversity is maintained, which is totally has been not has been taken care of much. So most of the healthy soil practices which have emerged in our part of the world have mostly been part of the non-conventional agriculture, and several sustainable practices are still on. So let us talk about science and how science has looked at this problem. Now, science, mostly the research content of the soil sciences have mostly been dominated by commodity-based agriculture research norms, agriculture sciences norm. By commodity-based agriculture sciences norm, I mean that when you evaluate a technology, when you are assessing success of a natural resource based technology, any soil science based technology, you assess it on the basis of yield enhancement. How much production it is making, how it is leading to a yield increase, and you never kind of evaluate it how and what it is doing to that particular natural resource. Is it affecting the soil? Is it affecting the soil organic content? Is it affecting the soil moisture content? Is it affecting the soil biodiversity? These are the questions which have largely been ignored when you're talking about soil science research. And the role of soil scientists have mostly been limited to recommending fertilizers, NPK, these many fertilizers are required, so yield has declined, so you increase it to that level. And even soil testing, and even soil testing is done for these macro and micronutrients to see what is lacking and then what you can put into the soil. So soil is just as a medium, and not it is not like a living soil, which it should be treated like as. Again, so when we were taking this from a commodity oriented, when we were using a commodity oriented approach for doing soil science research, funding patterns were also the same. Funding patterns, there was a lot of funding to support commodity oriented research only. So the research questions looking at the soil health, looking at the soil diversity, looking at other questions which lead to this has come out after we had in 2005 we did some analysis of various sub-disciplines under the soil sciences, and from that we could see that that how it was, the soil science research was skewed towards the commodity oriented research. I mean, soil physics and soil chemistry has been the basic science, and but the good news is that there is a lot of soil biology, a lot of efforts are being done, especially in southern part of India, where soil biology and soil microbiology, there are some very interesting projects going on, and where we have looked at some of these questions, because when we look into the soil biology aspects, when we look at, there are various actors involved, and in most of the soil sciences subdisciplines, we talk about soil chemistry, physics, or any other subdiscipline for that matter, we have very limited capacity, to look at, how different, I mean, actually the stakeholders are not even identified in that. But when you talk about soil biology, when there are successful examples where, these various stakeholders which were part of this, these projects, the projects which were biology based, which were looking, specifically looking at biological nitrogen fixation related projects which were done, we were looking at various actors and their linkages and the interactions between them, and how these were, how this kind of research was actually looking at some of the social utilization from the perspective of social utilization. So it was very, very, they were very, very interestingly done. So this is a ray of hope, where, we are looking at some of these questions in soil biology. So we've spoken about science, we've spoken about policy. So let's talk about some sustainable practices. Now, these practices, fortunately or unfortunately, these have all emerged from the non-conventional, these are normally referred to as non-conventional approaches, which are not the business as usual, or, they're not input intensive. And, and they've been named differently. You call them organic farming, you call them natural farming, biodynamic farming, various kinds of, several, sustainable practices have come up. But, all these technologies, all these not technologies, but practices for that matter, if we say, they are often labeled as unscientific, because, they have developed separately, and there is no partnership, and there is no legitimization by the scientific community. So when that is not there, then these learnings to reach at the policy level becomes very, very difficult. So the famous scientist, Dr. Biggs has said that, we have to look at other innovations also. Science is not the only, place where innovations happen. There are so many innovations happen, and they have been successfully. There are a lot of examples where sustainable practices, using these sustainable practices, they have been able to live in a healthy way and live and do their agriculture in a very, very healthy way. So it is very important that this entire knowledge, the entire knowledge of sustainable practices, it is codified, through that some of this ownership of some of these technologies and some of these practices is taken up by local universities and endorsed by experts, so that there is a collaboration between them, and it could be heard at a different level. Women in these sustainable practices have played a very, very important role, and women as innovators, we all know, have played a very important role. In India, agriculture is the mainstay, and women have played a very, very important role. But they have little access to titles or technologies. But then with introduction of modern technologies also, they were affected, like with shrinking of crop diversity. Input intensive agriculture has led to monocultures, crop diversity, diminishing of nutrition value in the crops, and led to all sorts of problems. But but women have been involved in a lot of adoption of a lot of sustainable agricultural practices. So it's meant to address them. It is important to identify them as to involve them in various levels of the policy making. What has been the public perception of science? We all know it is very important that science has to interact with public, and public understanding of science has mostly been about yields and costs and returns to farmers. And there has not been, it is very important to bring in the transparency and invoke trust in the scientific research, which has largely been absent in the public. And for example, farmers, they know that the practices they're using, they are bad, they're affecting their soils, but they end up pushing the chemicals because they want maximum output. So there's no incentive for the farmers to to practice some of those, to take up those practices. So it is very, very important to in that kind of content, so that policy, when there is public understanding of science is improved, then we can put that pressure on public policy makers, to make certain changes, to move towards more sustainable use or regenerative agriculture. So, looking at the whole scenario and understanding how the various domains of science, policy, and practice are placed, I think some of the key things, recommendations, which I would like to, based on my learning, like to bring could be like, soil sciences research, it cannot be directed by the commodity oriented or production oriented research, and it is very, very important to look at the questions on how these technologies, natural resource technologies, what are they doing to the natural resource, which is the question which is most often ignored. We need to look at some of those questions when we are looking at it. So the focus on natural resources research is very important. Now, soil is a finite and living source, and it is an interface between the agriculture and the environment. So it is very, very important that soil, to maintain soil health, because it maintains that balance between the two. So it is also important that that technology centering solutions means technology is not the solution to everything. Nature is complex, so we need to look at the kind of the actors playing the role and their linkages between them. So a systems approach, or a linear approach will not help natural resources research, and we need to look at diverse dimensions, including the gender dimension also, and also look at women as innovators or other actors which are present in the systems, in the innovation system of the natural resources. Look at them and see what they have to offer, if we really want to take them forward. So my main way forward could be that soil health has to be treated as a public good, like we treat air or water. If we really want to have food security, and we have to move from food security to food and nutritional security, because we all know that world over we have been able to meet those targets of production, we have been able to meet those targets of production, but now what we have to focus is on nutritional security, which is very, very important. And when we are talking about soil, we have to think about, we have to talk about, and we have to give emphasis to the diverse actors which are present, and the policy has to take clue on that. And soil sciences has to emerge as a very, very key discipline, as like any other agriculture or engineering or any other proper science discipline, and which has to focus on the natural resources research. And one factor I think which need mention here is integration of livestock, which is very, very important to bring back soil diversity, and which has to be supported by the kind of funding, the kind of the public participation, a decentralized approach, because soil is going to be different at different places. So these are some of the things which are very, very important. So in the end, I would end by saying that we have a responsibility towards our future generations to provide them with a safe environment and health, which can only come through healthy and nutritious food that comes from healthy soil. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sunita. That was really wonderful fly through that really complex web of different roles that people can play in agriculture. So our next speaker is Zac Barton. So Zac is a permaculture designer, activist, and teacher who's been in Nepal for the best part of the last 20 years. He is the founder of Almost Heaven Farms, which we see here, founded in 2013, where he researches and demonstrates with local farmers, but also international volunteers in these ideas, which I will let him talk about now. Over to you, Zac.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sound great.
All right. Well, a big namaste to everybody from Nepal. I'm in. Let's share my video again. Oh, okay. Well, hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm in the eastern hillside of Nepal, and we're just getting through the tail end of the last typhoon that's come through. So forgive me if my connection is a little bit sketchy. And if you guys can't hear me, I notice my video is coming and going because my connection is not fast enough. But yeah, big namaste to everybody. And my name is Zac Barton. I am a Canadian who has been living and working in Nepal for the last 8 years, here in 2003. Okay, there we go. Let's see if I can get the slide moving. I am dealing with some technical difficulties. Yeah, we just had a crazy typhoon. It's been windy and rainy like crazy for the last 3 days. So forgive me if I'm looking a little bit rough and if my presentation isn't working. But yeah, I came to Nepal in 2003 as a volunteer. And I volunteered for an organization called Prisoners Assistance Nepal. And I pretty much fell in love with the country, and I think for me it was especially about the diversity of everything. So the diversity of landscapes, the diversity of people, their culture, their faith systems, their languages, their food dishes, everything. It was just a fantastic experience for me. I fell in love with the country, and I decided that I would stay here and make my life. As you think about what you're going to do in your life, and especially as a foreigner in Nepal, you know, there was a lot of options, but I fell in love with farming, actually. So eventually I started my own permaculture education center called Almost Heaven Farms, and we are located in the furthermost eastern district of Elam, which is in the hillside. It's quite famous for tea production. It's a very rich agricultural area, and I started a permaculture education center there to work with farmers and farming communities to help them transition to permaculture, agroecology, regenerative agriculture, I mean, whatever you want to call it. But helping farmers transition to a system of agriculture which is really based on the principles of ecology and really based on nature. So we really focus with farming communities, and we say farming communities, not only farming or not only farmers, because we realize there's a culture and a community behind these kind of activities and this kind of work. And we also help them focus on transitioning. So when we talk about transitioning to regenerative agriculture, we understand that it takes time, it takes resources, it takes, you know, a lot of things actually. And the reason why we are helping farmers transition, or farming communities transition to regenerative agriculture is because we have the knowledge now. We understand that a farm is much more than just a place where we're growing food. So we understand that a farm can be a place where we can restore soils, waters, and the overall ecologies which provide for all life on this earth. So, oh, sorry, I'll go back there. So our Permaculture Center, Almost Heaven Farms, we have 4 main activities that we engage in. So the first one being demonstration. So we take all of the regenerative ag or agroecology and permaculture practices, systems, and we demonstrate it first. This is really important because for farmers, I mean for all people, but especially for farmers, seeing is believing. So farming communities, they need to be able to see these systems working with their own eyes to really believe that transitioning to this kind of agriculture is even possible. Once people see it and believe it, then the second step is we engage them in training and other educational matters. So we actually train them and provide them with educational resources on all of the different agroecology and regenerative agriculture systems. The third thing we do is then we help provide them with the resources they need to take that education and go back and implement those systems on their own farms. So by resources, we're talking about things like seeds, seedlings, and other biological resources, so biofertilizers, different kind of compost, whatever they need to be able to take back to their farms to integrate these systems onto them. The fourth activity that we engage in is research. And this is really fundamental to what we do, because when we demonstrate, when we train farmers and farming communities, we need to be 100% sure that the information that we're sharing with them is legit and will work according to their area, to their climate, to their elevation, to the ecology that they are living in. So we make sure that we research everything really well, we trial everything really well, so that they are getting the best education and the best resources possible, so that they can go back and implement this successfully. It's fundamental. We don't want anybody to have any problems. We don't want anybody to be over challenged. We want farmers to be able to go back with the knowledge and resources, the systems that they need to do this transition in a successful manner. This picture is our team. So we're a very small unit with very small resources, but trying to do as much as we can and engage as many communities across Nepal and across our bioregion as possible. So permaculture, regen ag, I mean, we're getting to soil in a minute, but I just want to give a brief description of what permaculture or regen ag means to me. It's really, for us, it's really about how do we integrate the principles of ecology into an agriculture system. So when people ask me what is permaculture, for me, permaculture is the integration of the principles of ecology or the principles of nature. That is how nature is resilient and regenerative. How do we take those principles and integrate them into an agricultural system? So we're pretty much taking the lessons from nature, the lessons from ecology, the systems, and how they're all integrated, and then we implement that in an agricultural system. So it's really about starting to see your farm as more than just a place of growing food, but as an ecology itself, and designing and managing and stewarding that land as if it is a real living ecology, and it is. So, view controls. I think this is what we're seeing. Size. Okay. So I think there's some technical issues, but hopefully the slide is too small. As a participant, you can zoom into the slide using the icon to show view controls.
I think it's fine. I think there's
just
didn't read the text. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't really have it so you could read the text, but you guys can go check this out. Hopefully, most of you can just listen to what I'm saying. But yeah. So how do we implement those principles of ecology into a farming system, and even why should we do that? So as a farm, and we are a social enterprise, so we operate as a business, but with the purpose of providing services to our community and to Nepal and to the greater bioregion that we live in. So we provide a bunch of different services, so from education in permaculture, permaculture design, volunteer opportunities, how to make different biofertilizers, and even going as far as into fermented foods and nutrition. But we are working with the community to capitalize on all of those ecological services which we get when we manage our farms according to nature. So these are kind of some of the services which we're providing in our community. And what it all ultimately comes down to, and what I've really learned a lot in my life, and especially in the last few years, is that connection between community health and soil. So it's, when we think of ecologies, we tend to think of everything which is happening above land. So, you know, jungles and savannas and wetlands and all of these things, but there is a whole ecology under our feet, the soil, which is really where all life comes from. And especially in a country like Nepal, where the majority of people are engaged in agriculture, that soil is fundamental. I mean, that is, you know, the life that supports for these communities. So when we engage communities in dialogue about something like regenerative agriculture or permaculture, we like to get right to the roots. And where the roots found, those roots are found in our soil. So we've engaged different communities really deeply in this conversation about soil and starting to understand the soil ecology. This is somewhat really new science. I mean, it's been known by indigenous communities around the world for so long, forever, about how important it is to care about soil and in general ecologies. But it got lost along the way, as Sunita explained in her presentation, that the science and the industry and education and everything really moved in the direction of chemistry, you know, and we didn't spend enough time talking about biology, and especially the biology in the soil and the life in the soil. So through all of our programming, we're taking the opportunity to introduce both traditional knowledge and the latest science around soil health, plant health, and I mean, what we really like to say today, these days, as the soil food web, or that ecology in the soil, is teaching farmers about the soil that's under their feet. How do we do that? We have a multi-pronged approach, but we've created educational materials. We have trainings and workshops, as well as working with the community to, I mean, educate them, but also help them develop farming systems where they are becoming stewards of the soil. They're becoming stewards of their soil on their farmland, and then starting to manage it accordingly. So yeah, really getting back to what are the roots of agriculture, where are those roots, and how do we start to understand and develop a relationship with the soil, have that soil's importance come back to farmers and the people that are stewards of that soil, and you know, then what kind of outcomes do we get when we do that? So what's the reason why we're doing that? I mean, this is not just about education, it's not just about farming and production, it's not, it's a really an integrated system, and what we want to get to is healthy soils creating healthy ecologies, and those ecologies providing services for humans. So beyond only nutrient dense, you know, organic, healthy food, but that's also, you know, conserving water, cleaning water, increasing biodiversity. And I believe Sunita talked about this a little bit also, is, I mean, the quality of our soil, the health of our soil directly, and the health of our ecology directly affects our own health. So understanding what are the connections between our soil health, our diet, and the current pandemic that we're in right now. So we're working with farmers to make these connections, to develop this understanding of soil health, and how that is affecting the health of the individuals and the individuals in the communities that we live and work in. So what are some of those impacts? What do we get when we work with farmers and women's groups and these communities in regards to soil and soil health? You know, there's been so many amazing impacts from this kind of work, and I've been involved in the, I'll call it international development, but I hate that word development, so please forgive me for even using it. But in this kind of international community work, you know, you'll see a lot of big organizations and government projects and a lot of money being thrown around for everything, but with very little impact. And what we found through our work over the last 15 years is that by focusing on things like soil and ecology and communities and agriculture, we've found that we've been able to have a lot of huge impacts. And that comes from in you know, increased health of communities, empowerment of women's groups, improved care for children and women, improved nutrition in the food people are eating, an improved understanding of ecology, the environment, climate change, how to mitigate climate change, how to build more resilience. Starting at that root, starting at the soil, we found that we've been able to really build a diversity and an integration of projects and programs which are having extreme positive impacts on the communities we're working with in a multitude of ways. It's a really fantastic path we've been on. I feel so blessed we've been able to engage communities in this conversation around soil and how we've been able to bring people in our community back to the earth and really improved the health. And you know what? It's really funny the last year and a half, and as Nepal, we're in our second wave now, so we're in our second lockdown. We've really been able to see the resilience that is developed in our communities because of our focus on soil and soil health. And that comes from their livelihoods being resilient, their health being resilient, the communities being resilient, their food security being resilient. I mean, there's just been such a multitude of impacts which we've been able to observe by doing this kind of work and this kind of development that it's like now people really understand why we've been doing what we've been doing and focusing on soil and soil health over the last few years. So this is where, oh, my kids were making some scratches on my screen, I see, but yeah, this is where we live, and this is an agricultural community which still values the ecologies around them and the ecosystems around them. I hope that all of these speakers and all of these opportunities which are in front of us right now around soil health and nutrient density, food security, the overall health of our community, I hope that everybody really can go deeply in this as we've been able to do, and that we really put that soil at the heart and at the center of all the work we're doing in our communities to develop communities which value and understand the importance of the ecologies and the ecosystems they live in. And eventually that this can go to a point where we start to affect local governments and policies, and that really the future idea of international development and international work can really be based on things like soil and soil health and community health. Thank you. That's it for me today. Again, I'm sorry for looking so rough and for my internet coming in and out. But thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you to everybody who put in so much work to set up this event. Please contact me if you have any questions or want to talk to me again more about anything. That's it. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Zac. I think you're going to get a lot more volunteers from this group now. We've seen those photographs. So I'll move swiftly on because we are running quite far behind time, to Rosa Poch, who is our final speaker. So Rosa is a soil science professor at the University of Lleida in Spain, and she's also chair of the Intergovernmental Technical Panel on Soils at the Food and Agriculture Organization at the UN. Her research very much looks at soil structure, and I think she can probably tell us best about that research herself. I'll hand over to you, Rosa. Oh, as long as you're there. Rosa, are you able to connect okay? Yeah, lovely. Now we can hear you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Maybe now it's better?
Yeah, no, we can hear you fine. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's wonderful. If you hear me, yeah, if there is any problem, you just tell me through the chat. Great. And then I will try to, yeah.
Fantastic. So yeah, we'll try and collate all questions for the speakers at the end.
Okay, good. So thank you for giving me the floor. Well, I'm working at the University of Lleida. This is northeast Spain. It's in Catalonia. I'm Catalan, and I am agricultural engineer. Yeah, so I am agronomist, but also soil scientist. And my field of research, as Ellie said, is I use soil micromorphology for several aspects of soil genesis, soil structure, effects of soil management, and so on. So I am very lucky to be able, through my thin sections, to dig into the soil, yeah, and see it from the inside. Okay, my talk today, in fact, it was prepared by Rosa Cuevas. Rosa Cuevas is a soil scientist working at the Secretariat of the Global Soil Partnership at the FAO. Yeah? The Global Soil Partnership is a partnership that gathers many organizations and entities and NGOs and any individuals even that have interest in the sustainable management of soils. Yeah. So this partnership was created, if I'm not wrong, in 2012. And then the Intergovernmental Technical Panel of Soils, the ITPS, is a panel of 27 soil scientists of all around the world who constitute the technical and scientific advisors to the GSP, to the Secretariat of the Global Soil Partnership. So I am lucky to chair this panel from 2018 to 2022 to next year. Yeah. So this is the frame. I want to apologize before starting because I was told by Rosa Cuevas this morning that she could not give this speech due to personal reasons, so I took over. So this presentation was prepared by her, and I apologize for any problem that may arise during the presentation because I did not prepare the slides. Anyway, I was participating in this project of writing this report on the state of knowledge of soil biodiversity, which is the subject of my talk. Yeah. So the GSP, the Global Soil Partnership, yeah. Okay, so I can, that's good that I can go through the slides. I'm going to talk about the state of knowledge of soil biodiversity. This is a huge report that was published last year and is a result of the collaboration of many organizations, not only the Global Soil Partnership, but also, not only the Global Soil Partnership, but also the Convention of Biological Biodiversity and Global Soil Biodiversity Initiative, among others. Yeah, and then it's the first time this report is written, and then it states the knowledge up to now of what is known about soil biodiversity at present, and this report and the summary for policymakers, they are online. You can download it from the website of the GSP. Good. Then I'm going to go through this report and explain the parts of the report and how was it written. I think that there are about 200 or 300 participants. So the best specialists on each field were contacted, and they contributed to the report. So this report was written because soil biodiversity can be clearly identified as a cross-cutting topic, and it is at the heart of the alignment of several global agendas, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, and also many multilateral environmental agreements, in particular those related to biodiversity, desertification, and climate change. And furthermore, soil biodiversity and ecosystem services will be pivotal for the success of the recently declared UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So a report explaining the state of art of the knowledge on soil biodiversity was needed to design policies and to find strategies for ecosystem restoration, since, as it has been said by the former speakers, soil biodiversity is at the core of general or global diversity. I want also to point out that the GSP is author of many other reports, and one of them is the Voluntary Guidelines for Sustainable Soil Management, that identifies the main threats for soil health, for the maintenance of soil quality. So what is soil biodiversity? Yeah, so we can define soil biodiversity not only, soil biodiversity is not the list of different species that we find in soils. It would be very simplistic way. Yeah, soil biodiversity is this, but also the niches and the environment where they live, the functions they exert, and also the interrelations, the network of relations between them, the ecological complexes. Yeah, so all the relations, the symbiotic relations between them, the parasitic, the relations with plants and with animals and with humans and with everything. So, and this at many scales, yeah, from microhabitats to landscapes, even from genes to landscapes. Yeah, so this is biodiversity. Okay, so this is very complex, and we must say that we know a very tiny amount of information about all this that I have said. Yeah, you have to think that about bacteria, soil bacteria, or soil viruses, we know maybe 1% of them or 2% of them. And about, for instance, macrofauna or mesofauna, we know from some functional groups, we know 10% of them. So you can imagine, we know, sometimes we know more about stars and about distant planets and so than from the soil that we have below our feet. Okay, why it's so important? Well, I think I don't have to stress this, I think, yeah, because it has been said already by the other speakers. It is at the core of all the processes that relate to environment. Yeah, so all carbon transformations, nutrient cycling, formation of soil structure, biological regulation, and so it's impossible to think about life in Earth as it is now without the role of these very small organisms that live in soils, yeah, and of all these networks that they create. So this was the contents of chapter 2, is to describe to describe the, sorry, this is one of these problems. Okay, so in chapter 3, so in chapter 1 or 2 are the definition of soil biodiversity, the description of the organisms that we are going to see in the following chapters. In chapter 3, we are describing, in fact, actually these relationships between functional groups. Yeah? Functional groups are aggregations of species on the basis of similar diets and life story traits. It means that we will have primary, what's that? Yeah, we have the autotrophic organisms, so plants and autotrophic microorganisms, and then we have primary decomposers, secondary decomposers, and we have all the relations between them in the trophic chains. And also between them and the environment, the mineral components of the soil, yeah, that in fact are the ones that are providing the nutrients. So we can, in the chapter, these different channels or paths are described. So the decomposing channels, but also the biomass formation channels. And then this is not only matter flows, but also energy flows. So you can understand that these kind of relations are very complex. As I said, not all of them are understood. And here there are only those that have been identified. So in this chapter, these different functions of soil microorganisms acting in the different ecosystem service of the soils. So ecosystem services go from soil-water relationships to climate regulation to those more related to food production, yeah, as carbon sequestration and nutrient cycling. And in these functions that here you have all these functions related to the different SDGs, yeah, to the different sustainable development goals, the microorganisms and soil biota have a very important function. So chapter 4 describes several threats, all the threats that are identified for soil biodiversity, yeah, at present. So here you have several of them. One of them would be deforestation that affects mostly habitats of microorganisms and of soil biota, and loss of species. And sometimes these effects are very different to reverse, yeah, after this deforestation has happened. Agricultural intensification. Well, we know that agriculture by definition, and I am agronomist, agriculture by definition is diminishing the biodiversity because you want your crop to be grown. Yeah. So when you intensify agriculture, you are threatening soil biodiversity. Well, my intention is not that you read all these definitions and all these small letters, but just give an overview of what are the different threats. Yeah? Nutrient imbalances, for instance, due to excessive nitrogen fertilization, which is a problem in some parts of the world. So it also threatens soil biodiversity because you have antagonisms of nutrients. Acidification, it may be the problem at the other side. So when we don't have enough nutrients in the soil and we have rainy climates that leach out nutrients, and then we have impoverishment of soils. Salinization. In fact, salinization and salt-affected soils will be the subject of the next World Soil Day, the 5th of December this year. And salinization, apparently it affects only desertic or dry areas in the world, but this is not true. Every country is affected in one way or another, or may be affected by salinization. Yeah? Pollution. Yeah, it's clear the effects of pollutants in soil that threaten the existence of organisms. Then we have also compaction by several agents, either by cattle or by heavy machinery. Urbanization and surface sealing due to sealing, permanent sealing due to roads or to buildings that isolates the biota below ground and then eventually kills the soil, in fact. We have also some threats due to frequent fires. Yeah, fire is a natural agent in many parts of the world. Yeah, that is recurrent, but when it affects soil more often than natural occurrence, then you may have problems of loss of biodiversity. And also some other soil degradation processes as erosion and landslides, and in general loss of soil organic carbon or organic matter that affects the cycling of nutrient, the amount of carbon you have in the soil. It affects also the biodiversity. So all these threats are described in detail in this chapter 4. In this chapter, you have an exercise of identifying for each ecoregion, for each ecosystem, general ecosystem in the world, what are the main threats. Yeah, and it showed that the most widespread threat to soil biodiversity in the world, in general, is the loss of soil organic matter. Yeah, that could be associated with other threats such as deforestation and agricultural intensification. And these two are linked, indeed, with land use change and with climate change, particularly in tundra ecosystems, in these ecosystems that are experiencing a retreat of permafrost areas. Yeah, and then this causes the aeration of soil, drainage and aeration, and mineralization of organic matter. Yeah, and this is really a regional threat in this area. Good. Then chapter 5. This is for me is the most interesting chapter because it deals with proposals of how to use the opportunities of managing soil biodiversity to fight against some of the threats or some of the problems that ecosystems and soil have. For instance, environmental remediation or bioremediation. So there are several strategies of using microorganisms to remove or to process or to immobilize the toxic elements due to pollution or other causes. We have several strategies here. We have bioaugmentation or phytoremediation, vermiremediation using worms, for instance. And well, there are many kinds of strategies that we can use for alleviating the problems due to soil pollution. Other nature-based solutions, for instance, soil rehabilitation of mining areas where you have a complete disturbance of the surface. There are techniques to restore the ecosystem once the mining activity has stopped, using microorganisms and groups of organisms that can regenerate the soil after mining. So it's creating again soil in these affected areas using organic amendments, organic residues as sewage sludge, compost, wood chips, and working with native plants and autochthonous soils. Also, yeah, for food security, yeah. So we have seen that excessive use of chemical fertilizers, the conventional crops with conventional fertilizers, may have in some places, if it is not well done, we can have leaching of nitrates and so pollution of groundwater. We may have N2O emissions, which is a very powerful, very strong greenhouse gas. So we can avoid or mitigate these effects using alternative fertilizers, using inoculums, microbial inoculums that may provide the same nutrients, but more distributed in time and with limited leaching and limited N2O emissions. Also, for biological control, we may use microorganisms to fight against some pathogens, yeah, and avoid the use of chemicals to kill these pathogens. And in general, as it has been said before, from the soil we can obtain vaccines, medicines, and we have a very broad field here for discovering in traditional medicine and in some parts of the world the traditional knowledge of what we can obtain from the soil to get chemicals and to get medicines to heal us. Yeah. So chapter 6 presents the result of a survey that was done to all the countries, that was sent to all focal points of the FAO in all countries. And the aim was to collect information at the country level. Oh yes, sorry, Ellie, I'm finishing. Yeah, so I will go fast. So it collected information at country level about the status of soil biodiversity. So to know if in the countries there was any legislation or assessment of monitoring of soil biodiversity. And the full questionnaire, you can find it in the report. And well, here you have the conclusions and the way forward. So monitoring and standard protocols and procedures for assessing soil biodiversity at different scales are needed, and increase the knowledge on soil biodiversity and so on. I'm going fast, so I'm going also to speak very briefly about the Global Symposium on Soil Biodiversity that we had last April, so last month. This was a global symposium, a virtual symposium, of course, and it was an enormous success. Look at the number of participants. Yeah, so it was very important for us to know that soil biodiversity was so much widespread, the knowledge of it, and well, it was done in collaboration with Soil Biodiversity Initiative that has some protocols, yeah, for the establishment of a network of biodiversity monitoring. And we are at present working in the outcome document with all the conclusions. And I don't know if these slides will be available to everybody, but in the next slides, we have the main recommendations of this report. Anyway, this report will be public and will be available at the website of the Global Soil Partnership. So once it's ready, you can have a look. I will go fast through the last slides, so you can have a glimpse of what will be included, the recommendations, development of networks, spreading the knowledge of soil biodiversity, developing a technical booklet about the main soil-borne diseases, which is very important. So to join the soil health with One Health concept of the UN, and also a way of evaluating soil biodiversity, policies and legal instruments, and it will be available so together with all the abstracts and the presentations that were presented. So thank you very much, and sorry for exceeding the time.
No.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Rosa. That was absolutely wonderful. I'm really sorry to hurry you along. I just wanted to make sure we had a little bit of time for questions at the end. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat, and we can ask them here. So there was one question from Natasha, who I think asked her question quite directly to Zachary, and he has answered her specific question, but I'm going to generalize it a little bit. So Natasha was asking whether Zachary includes or reaches out to people working in cities or living in cities in like looking at the way that the agriculture can function. So more generally, for all the speakers, I suppose, perhaps particularly Sunita and Zachary, what role can people from living in urban areas play in sort of transitioning to this much more exciting, well, I think more exciting, this much more sustainable form of agriculture? So I'll ask that to Sunita first. Or Zachary, if you're there.
Yeah, I can jump. Yeah, I can jump in there. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. For us, our approach is everybody who eats food is part of our community and part of our programming. So a lot of the work to be done in urban areas is, I mean, besides kind of urban greening and urban agriculture or urban permaculture or whatever you want to call it, is definitely that the people who consume food can be more aware about how their food is grown, where it's grown, as well as the nutrient density or the overall nutrition of that food. So everybody who consumes food can become a little bit more aware about this system, and they can also support us with their dollars or with their rupees, with their pesos, wherever you're from. That makes a big difference. But that's from a consumer side. From a producer side, I think we also have the responsibility to see that our sisters and our brothers in non-food growing environments also deserve the right. They have the right to access to healthy, nutrient-dense, ecologically grown food also. So 100% food-growing communities and food-consuming communities are connected, they're integrated, and they're both extremely important in us kind of moving the soil health and agroecology, regen ag movement forward.
Fantastic, thank you. So there was a question for Sunita directly, if you're able to reconnect at all. Are there any policies in place in India which focus on conserving the soil biodiversity and perhaps subsidizing farmers for these kind of practices?
Yeah, thank you, Mary, for your question. We do have some programs, and policies, but they are very less as compared to the mainstream, fertilizer policy, the nutrient-based policy. The nutrient-based policy is the main policy. Nutrient-based policy means the chemical fertilizer-based policy. That is the mainstay of the agriculture policy. But we do have interventions, and we do have some policies to conserve soils. We are also signatory to the Convention on Biodiversity, which in the previous presentation Rosa was mentioning. India is signatory to that. But then we have some programs like on organic agriculture. Some projects are there. We have a National Center for Organic Farming, where we are pushing organic farming through these practices, and there are some local practices. Then we also do in integrated nutrient management and pest management, but they are all the main policy is to do them along with the chemical fertilizers, so not alone. So they have to both go along with, it's not like, we are only pushing sustainable practices, but we do have, small efforts going on, but more needs to be done. They are not sufficient, looking at the scale of agriculture and the scale of efforts which are required to really have an impact on the soil health. Thank you.
Fantastic. So I think there's a question here which I'm going to ask you while I've got you here, Sunita.
Yeah.
Should we make any rules regarding criteria for using fertilizers if they have consequences? And perhaps you and also Rosa might have a opinion on that.
Definitely, anybody who is in love with soils and who wants soil health improvements, because we all know how much harm these chemical fertilizers have done. They have poisoned our food chains. They have impacted the crops which we grow, because because these fertilizers are used mostly for those crops which are also the main food crops, like wheat and rice, which constitute main food bowls, in any country, main staple food. So majority of chemicals are going there. So we would really love to have that, because I think this report which Rosa was talking about, in this report they're also talking about these legal provisions, but at present, right now we don't have anything of that sort. But we would love to have anything of that, a convention like that, or a kind of rule. But we have we do say, we do soils testing and we apply fertilizers based on the soil testing, but that effort is very, very less. If we really need to come out with some strict policy interventions to really curb that misuse of fertilizers, and I really appreciate that, if that could happen. I don't know if it is happening in other countries. I would love to know that if that is happening, because we can always share those best practices. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. I've never heard of that as yet. Rosa, did you have anything to add on that?
Yes, indeed. I was writing it in the chat, but well, I can answer, because Madhu was asking some details on that, because in the Global Symposium last month, Dr. Ashok Patra from India was one of the communications was indeed this program, yeah. And I don't know of any other program, a similar program in the world. I'm sure maybe there are similar things, but well, it was very interesting, because he explained that in India there has been a promotion of biofertilizers. One of the problems of using these kind of biofertilizers is that is the quality control. So the standardization of these products and to make sure that they do not harm, yeah, that you don't have adverse effect in the soil. Yeah, so it's very interesting to know how this program has been implemented there, and then it's a whole program of installing, of creating labs for quality control, promoting the use of biofertilizers by subsidies to farmers, by extension and dissemination of the properties of these biofertilizers, and so in a way of decreasing the use of chemical fertilizers. Yeah, it will be in the proceedings of the symposium. So as soon as the proceedings are ready, you will be able to look at it.
Wonderful. And by biofertilizers, are you talking about?
Yes, biofertilizers. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to define that for anyone who might not.
Define is the use of biological components. So is the use of bacteria cultures as fertilizers. You add this to the soil, yeah, in a way of when they decompose, they generate nutrients, but also you provide some you add biodiversity to the soil, and you improve all these chains, yeah, of releasing nutrients in a more steady way, more in time, yeah, not as chemical fertilizers that can be leached or emitted in the atmosphere.
Fantastic, thank you. And there's one question directly to you, Rosa. So if you want to stick around for that. Question from sorry, there's someone trying to come in.
Oh, hey, yeah. Sorry, can I just add something to that?
Oh yes, please.
Yeah, just one point of view from a farming community standpoint. Especially in places like India or Nepal, or I mean, a lot of agricultural systems. So I think from a farmer standpoint, rather than having rules and regulations put into place, I think we need to come up with systems that incentivize these kind of ecological growing systems. So I think when governments or markets or consumers, when they value the outputs of health soil or healthy soil, so nutrient dense foods, tasty foods, oxygen production, carbon dioxide capture, water retained, soil retained, food security. I mean, I think we need to incentivize all of these things rather than, have a whole structure of rules which need to be implemented and stuff like that. So I think once farmers get more from adapting or implementing these soil health principles on their farms, that's when we're really going to go somewhere.
Fantastic, yeah, and looks like Sunita's completely agreeing with you in the chat as well. So I'm conscious we need to go to the photo competition, but hopefully can we squeeze in one more question, guys, or should we move on?
For sure. Do you want? For sure, we got time.
Yeah, let's go for it. So this is a question from Jocelyn. So she makes a comment that it's great to see soil biodiversity being a priority in high-level policy commitments, but discussions about feeding a growing global population are also suggesting that we need to maintain an intensive level of agricultural production to feed this growing population. So can these two goals, these two requirements seem to contradict each other to a certain extent. Can they be reconciled?
Yeah.
That question is addressed to Rosa, but I guess anyone who'd like to address it.
Yeah, can I say something? Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll be very short. In fact, this is the 1 million question. Yeah. This is really a highly discussed topic because there are global studies and global budgets of nutrients in the world, and so some of them say yes, but many of them say no. I mean, not that it cannot be reconciled, but that is not possible only with organic fertilizers to feed the whole population in the world. Yeah, and in fact, there are studies that say that the use of chemical nitrogen fertilizers at present is feeding half of the population of the world. So without nitrogen fertilizers, it would not be possible to sustain, I don't know, how many people are we? 7,000 million people? Things like that. Yeah, so it's not possible. It is true that at some scales, as it has been demonstrated by Zac and by many communities, it is possible, yes. But think about mega cities like Mexico, like so it's you must have some kind of intensive agriculture. The thing is that we have the tools, and it has been shown by this report, we have the tools to reconcile sustainable soil management with food production. Yeah, we know how to do that. The thing is that we should apply it. Yeah, so sustainable management is possible, and it's possible to apply chemical fertilizers without harming the environment. Yeah, it's what I believe. Yeah.
Fantastic, thanks. Zachary or Sunita, did either of you want to comment?
No, I agree with Rosa. There is a kind of, I think we need to have a balance, that kind of a balance somewhere, where we don't have to cross that line where, it leads to that kind of destruction that we can't come back, So there has to be, so that is why we are saying the farming communities and the local practices, as well as the scientific community, they have to sit back and look out for solutions in such a way that it can both purposes could be solved. It is important that all the stakeholders they have to sit back so that policymakers can make certain changes and come out with solutions which would work in favor of the resources. Because if we will not take care of resources now, they are bound to come back in very difficult and different ways. They're going to harm us, So
Absolutely. And Zac, did you have a perspective from someone that's actively getting this working?
Yeah, I think one thing we need to acknowledge is that most people around the world are fed not by mainstream industrial chemical agriculture, but by small farming. And we need to support communities, and we need to support small farmers and small farming communities around the world, not to be sustainable, but to be actually more regenerative. So looking at the current industrial agriculture system as a problem and as a challenge, but the solution is actually how more than half the world's food is grown. So we already have those systems in place. We already have those people growing food. We already have those communities. It's about how do we help them transition to regenerative systems. And in the half of the world where we are dependent on industrial agriculture, how do we transition into what is going to be the future of agriculture, which is more small farms, more ecologically based production, and more community developed around agriculture. But that's already how most of the food in the world is grown. So we have that, we have those solutions. And just last note that a country like India or a country like Nepal or other countries around the world which are doing small-scale intensive agriculture, they should be the models for development around the world. We don't need industrial, big ag, corporate solutions to these problems. We need countries like Nepal and the communities, the agricultural communities here, to be the example for the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think so Rosa made a really good point in the chat that intensive agriculture can't be expected to feed the world because of the damage it does to soil health. And so, we need a solution that isn't one or other of these things. It's some manifestation of a sustainable approach, like you say, which is perhaps going to have to be more local in terms of the way it's implemented, rather than a kind of one-size-fits-all forms of agriculture that we've tried to do in the past. So I think we're going to probably have to wrap up. I know that there's school pickup and things to do around this time. So I'm going to hand over to Mayen again to finish us off, and just thank you very much to our fantastic speakers and to everyone who's participated. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the speakers. So I will start with the the photo competition and just show you some of our wonderful submissions from the participant. And it gives us a variety of range of photos from home growing to like photo with great imaginations. And also there are stories about the history of coffee and also very delicious cakes. Also, we can actually see some worms here, and yeah, some photo which brings about memory when they were in UK, and a cider farm which I've never been to, and also here's a very delicious Chinese dessert, and so here is here's our first winner for the runner-up, and it's from Xiaobo, which says sometimes it feels like our supermarket food comes from Santa. It's a very nice Christmas tree made of broccoli. And second runner-up is millet balls from Sumamani, and is traditional India food, I think. And finally is our winner for the competition from Bharat Chandran. It's a very good photo of paddy field, and is sometimes when we live in a very long time in the urban area, we don't know where our food comes from. So thank you for the photos and congratulations to 3 of our winners, and thank you to all our participants for submitting your photos. They are very, very nice and beautiful. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone to come and join the event. And we will send emails to the winners to ask about the details of the contact. So thank you everyone.